Hey, welcome in. It's Laura from Tenacious Taurus Tarot and Astro Insights, and today I wanted to talk about something completely out of the box. I wanted to talk about how to spot your shadow self and how to find acceptance with the shadow self. And so currently we have Lilith and Libra. That's the shadow self energy that I personally am integrating. I am a Lilith and Libra, and collectively we are all feeling this shadowy energy of Lilith and Libra somewhere in our birth chart. So I wanted to talk about the shadow self because the shadow self does represent the darker aspects within ourselves. It represents the darker side of who we are. And there are ways to find your shadow side. And the example of a shadow self would basically be getting answers around this shadow work. So let's talk about Lilith and Libra first, because Lilith and Libra, it signifies this deep desire, this deep need for balance and fairness when it comes to relationships. There's also this very strong drive for harmony and diplomacy. And so for me, with my Lilith placement in Libra, that is what I'm striving for, is to create balance within partnerships. And let me tell you, I have experienced a lot of inequality and imbalances within relationships. And so this has definitely influenced and triggered my shadow side of Lilith and Libra. It's definitely made me acutely aware of where I need to shift the way I approach relationships in this pursuit of harmony. And so basically Lilith and Libra is manifesting collectively with this strong sense and drive for justice. Lilith is all about equality when it's in the sign of Libra, and mutual respect is huge for me within relationships, within interactions with others. And when that isn't there, boy, oh boy, does my shadow self get triggered really, really badly. And so right now with Lilith transiting through Libra, it's going to be aspecting all of us in certain areas of our birth chart, whether it's going to be in an opposition or a square. It's going to be sitting somewhere within your housing. And so the energy of Lilith in this sign is saying, hey, where can you create harmony and peace in your life? And how can you align perfectly to the energy of Lilith in this sign of Libra? And so this is a very challenging Lilith placement, I feel, because we also do struggle with the shadow self with Lilith and Libra when it comes to indecisiveness. Oh boy, I can't tell you how many times I have been indecisive, and that has really kind of led me down the pathway of missing out on some really amazing opportunities within relationships. And so if you find it very difficult to make decisions, then really look at where Lilith is sitting at in your birth chart, because it also involves this energy of maybe feeling like you need to choose sides, which can make decision making very difficult. But basically Lilith and Libra in the shadow self will disrupt this balance that Lilith and Libra does highly value. And so there's another challenge when it comes to Lilith and Libra, because I don't know about you, but I know personally I tend to suppress my anger, and when she blows, she blows. And so Lilith and Libra, or any Libra placements for that matter, we try to avoid confrontations. We try to avoid confrontations at all costs, even if that means bottling up our feelings. And that really isn't good, because when we suppress anger, it leads to the shadow self and passive aggressive behaviors. And so although we need to maintain balance, that doesn't really mean maintaining a facade. And so if it's a facade of peace and harmony, then bottom line is all of this seething anger inside is eventually going to boil to the surface, and that's going to be the shadow side of Lilith and Libra. And so there's a lot of positive qualities that Lilith and Libra does bring forward, but there's a lot of challenges that Lilith and Libra also brings forward. And so let's talk about some of the main challenges that I've had to grapple with integrating and facing my own shadow self and finding acceptance with Lilith and Libra as my Lilith placement. So indecisiveness and difficulty making choices. And so I used to often struggle with making decisions because it is the representation of the scales. I used to spend an excessive amount of time weighing pros and cons, and it led me down the pathway of inaction. And so inaction is also a strong form of self-sabotaging behaviors. And so when we don't make a choice, the universe often will make choices for us, but it can really impede our personal and our professional lives if we're not willing to make a choice. And so we kind of got to learn about that trait. We got to get in touch with that trait of indecisiveness, and we have to understand, why are we struggling to make decisions? Because maybe you're so used to people making decisions for you, and so it's kind of difficult, right? Because you don't want to make the wrong choice. But eventually, if you don't make a choice at all, you might miss out on some really amazing opportunities. When we suppress our anger, that was another big thing. I used to suppress my anger to avoid conflict. And so conflict avoidance really isn't creating peace and harmony, right? And so if you have a deep desire for peace and harmony, then you can't ignore these feelings, because when you ignore your feelings and you repress these negative emotions, it leads to resentment, leads to bitterness, and a whole lot of frustration. And so when we play into passive aggressive behavior, this is basically all of this unexpressed anger boiling over, and it usually does boil over in the most unopportune times and very unexpectedly. Lilith and Libra, huge negative trait of people pleasing. Actually, I find most Libra placements are people pleasers. And so Lilith in Libra is overly concerned with pleasing others. And it took me years to stop sacrificing my happiness at the expense of other people. And so I do feel, as much as we do like to maintain desire and avoid conflict, when we lose our sense of personal identity because of people pleasing, then boy, oh boy, do we have all of these negative emotions of resentment towards all of these people that we've people pleased. And so we can't be afraid of confrontation on the journey. When we fear confrontation, it leads to a lack of assertiveness. And let me tell you, the flip side of indecision is, boy, oh boy, I'm going to get you. And so I know for myself personally, I have been taken advantage of so many times on my life journey because of fear of confrontation. Another placement that also carries this fear of confrontation is Lilith in Pisces. And so we struggle with confrontation. There's an overemphasis on keeping the peace. And so when we put so much importance on the external appearance of our lives and keeping the peace, then we neglect our inner needs. And so there's this constant pressure, I feel, with Lilith and Libra to maintain balance, to maintain this perfect sense of reality, even if you are struggling internally. And so we also can deal with a lot of issues around self-esteem and body image with Lilith transiting through Libra. So let's talk a little bit more about the shadow self, because the shadow self is basically referring to all of these unconscious parts of our human psyche, all of the parts that we hide from ourselves, that we hide from others when it comes to being in plain view. And so it's really not the self that we show to others consciously, to our friends or to our families. It's the self that we hide that isn't very nice, that is always there. And I can be mean. I can be very mean. My words can cut people very deeply. And to be mean does not mean that you're being bad either. And so it's just a side of ourselves, right? That's always there. We always need to work on the shadow self. And when we work on the shadow self, we grow. We grow as a person. We grow spiritually. And we do have to learn to love our shadow self, because it is a part of us, right? We all have a shadow self. And so everyone has a shadow. You can't run from it. So let's talk about ways to identify the shadow self and to reach a place of acceptance. So when we find the shadow self, usually a big part of finding the shadow self is checking that 12th house. Look at the 12th house in the birth chart. Check the 12th house because the 12th house does rule over the subconscious mind. And whatever sign that house is in, there's going to be some sign of the shadow self in there too. So for example, I'm a 12th house Aquarius. And so my south node also sits in the 12th house in Aquarius. And so my shadow self also is afraid to step outside the box. And so really sit with that 12th house energy and ask yourself, what shadow is sitting in there based on your own personal 12th house? List the qualities that you don't like about other people. That's a really quick way to figure out your shadow self, because if you grab a piece of paper, if you write a list of all of the qualities that annoy you and trigger you and piss you off about other people, there's a shadow inside of you connected to that mirror, right? Because everything's a mirror. So say if you don't like people that gossip, be mindful of where you gossip. If you don't like people who hold grudges, where are you holding a grudge? Write it all down, make a list, write it all down. Whatever it is that you're annoyed about in another, it's also an unconscious pattern within you that you need to look at, because everything in life is a mirror. And so this list is going to be a huge indication of your shadow self and what it is that you need to integrate. When we step back and we analyze our first reaction. So what is your first reaction to a negative situation? What's your first reaction? That is your true self. That is also your shadow self, right? When we react out of the subconscious patterns, that's your shadow self. And so take notice of how you react when you're hurt. How do you react when you are angry, or even have a random mean thought? That is your shadow self coming out, and we all have a shadow self. We all have initial first reactions, and we're also here to learn to respond and not react. And so journaling was a huge part of my journey. It still is a huge part of my journey. I'm a huge advocate for journaling. And so journaling really is a great way to understand your shadow self. It's just a great way to understand you, the patterns that you play into, free writing, automatic writing, channeling, whatever it is you want to call it. Talk to yourself. Talk to your shadow self. Talk to yourself through automatic writing and through journaling. Let the words flow through you. It is a super healing process. You don't have to force it, but it really has helped me along my healing journey, journaling. Ask your shadow self to come in. Invite your shadow self to come in. Sit with the shadow self. The best way to deal with your shadow is to greet it, is to meet it, is to feel it, is to see it. And so when we welcome in the shadow self, we meditate on opening up to the shadow self. We open our arms to the shadow self saying, hey, I welcome you. You're a part of who I am, and it's just a disowned part of myself. And so when you invite yourself to invite the shadow in, it teaches you more about yourself, and it also allows you to accept the negative aspects of self. We all have some parts of us that we really don't like, that really aren't pretty. And so accepting the shadow self sounds really easy on paper. It sounds super easy, but it's actually a very difficult process. And the more we integrate and the more we accept that shadow self, the more that shadow self doesn't come out in unconscious patterns and unconscious ways. And so we have to be ready to do the work. We have to be ready to really look at the shadow, embrace the shadow, and we have to learn to love our shadow, which means loving all of these parts of ourselves that maybe we don't like at times, right? But when we do shadow work, it does help us to love and understand all of these negative aspects of ourselves at a very deep spiritual level. And so your shadow is really not a monster. We have to befriend that monster within us. We all have a monster. And so the shadow self actually teaches a lot about us on the journey. So how do you control your shadow self? Can you even control your shadow self? The best way and the only way to be able to have any part of control over that shadow self is to know thyself, to be aware of your negative aspects, to practice mindfulness. Mindfulness is huge. Mindfulness allows us to be the observer, to notice negative awareness patterns, and then we can begin to consciously change them. And change takes time. And so how can you begin to do some shadow work here? The first step in doing shadow work is allowing yourself to be open to examining all of these unlikable parts of yourself. You're not going to like these parts of yourself. Other people aren't going to like these parts of yourself, but we have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, or we will never, ever truly begin doing that real deep soul work of this shadow integration. And so shadow work really is not dangerous at all. Shadow work is 100% safe, guys. Shadow work is basically dealing with our inner shadow, our inner demons, our inner monsters, rather than just hiding ourselves. And so ultimately, to get to a place of self-acceptance, we have to accept these unwelcome parts of ourselves. And we also have to be open to exploring these depths within our psyche that really are unpleasant. But this is the only way to go forward and build true intimacy and true connections with others. So I just wanted to share a little bit of information. I know I talk about shadow work a lot. I talk about the negative aspects that we have to kind of go through. And so all of these energies, I feel collectively, are challenging us when it comes to the shadow self that gets triggered with imbalances within relationships. And so hopefully this helped you. Hopefully this will help you also approach relationships better in the future. Let me know down in the comments what you thought. Let me know if you'd like me to do more videos like this. I'm trying to kind of step outside of the box, guys, but I hope this helped. I hope this resonated, and I do look forward to seeing you all again next time. Thank you.